The Development of the Cold War from 1945 to 1955 by Brittany Chorn. Narration by Brittany Chorn. The Cold War was the geopolitical, ideological, and economic struggle between two world superpowers, the USA and the USSR. The Cold War began in 1945 as the United States and Soviet Union faced one another after defeating Hitler's Germany and Japan, and lasted until the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Because the two countries never fought each other directly, it was called a Cold War, meaning there was no physical fighting. No one of these events started the Cold War, but in combination and rapid succession, it was inevitable. The Yalta Conference took place in a Russian resort town in the Crimea on February 1945. During the conference, Winston Churchill, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Joseph Stalin agreed to demand Germany's unconditional surrender and began plans for post-war world. In August 1945, U.S. President Harry S. Truman made the decision to use the atom bomb to end the war in order to prevent what he predicted would be a much greater loss of life were the United States to invade the Japanese mainland. Hundreds of thousands in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were killed immediately or died from radiation after the bombings. On March 5, 1946, President Harry S. Truman introduces Winston Churchill at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri. In his speech, Churchill introduced the phrase Iron Curtain to describe the division between Western powers in the area controlled by the Soviet Union. President Harry Truman signed the Marshall Plan on April 3, 1948, granting $13 billion in aid to 16 European nations. This would give economic support to help rebuild European economies after the end of the World War II in order to prevent the spread of Soviet communism. The Soviet Union and Communist Eastern Europe refused the aid, stating dollar enslavement. The Berlin blockade was one of the first major international crises of the Cold War. On June 24, 1948, the Soviet Union blocked the Western Allies' railroad and canal access to the sectors of Berlin under the Western control. From June 1948 to May 1949, U.S. and British planes airlifted 1.5 million tons of supplies to the residents of Western Berlin. After 200,000 flights, the Soviet Union lifted the blockade. On April 4, 1949, President Truman signed the North Atlantic Treaty in Washington, D.C., which established the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This is a formal alliance between the territories of North America and Europe. Its main purpose was to defend each other from the possibility of Communist Soviet Union taking control of their nation. In June 1949, Chinese Communists won victory over Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist forces. Mao Zedong officially proclaims the existence of the People's Republic of China on October 1st. 2 months later, Mao Zedong traveled to Moscow to meet with Joseph Stalin and negotiate the Sino-Soviet Treaty of Friendship, Alliance, and Mutual Assistance. North Korean Communist forces invaded South Korea on June 25, 1950. 2 days later, President Truman ordered U.S. forces to assist the South Koreans. In 1953, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were American citizens executed for conspiracy to commit espionage. They were found guilty of relaying U.S. military secrets to the Soviets. The Rosenbergs were the first U.S. civilians to be sentenced to death for espionage. The Rosenbergs' conviction helped fuel the rise of McCarthyism. The anti-communist campaign led by U.S. Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin from 1953 to 1954. The senator was strongly opposed to the spread of communism throughout the world. As a result, he started investigating people in the U.S. for possible communist ties. In 1955, the Warsaw Pact was formed. It was a collective defense treaty among 8 communist states of Central and Eastern Europe.